Hello, I'm Carrie and this is episode 10. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a knitter and knitwear designer based out of Columbus, Ohio, and this is my knitting studio. It's my little retreat where I get to work on all of my knitting projects when I'm not at work or chasing after my young daughter. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today to chat all about knitting. It's been a little while since I've recorded a regular podcast episode. I think it's been honestly a little more than a month, so I had to go back and look at what was I even working on, what was in progress, what had I started, what had I finished, and what's new on the needles and all of that. And that means I have a lot to talk about today. So I have 3 finished objects, 2 work in progress updates, plus an additional work in progress that's now back on the needles thanks to my Stash Dive and Revive segment project thing that I have going on, as well as 2 new cast-ons. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm wearing my Claire sweater that I originally designed for KnitScene back in, I think it was in 2018, so it's been a number of years since I designed this. It's just a classic pullover with seamed set and sleeve construction, so very traditional construction overall. And the fun detail about this one is the yoke. It just has a pretty texture with a central cable here. And then I knit the 3/4 sleeve option. Honestly, if I was knitting it for myself, I would have knit the long sleeve version, but this is what I knit for the magazine sample. It's now of course back in my possession, and I do wear this sometimes. I feel like I don't always reach for it because of the 3/4 length sleeves. It's a worsted weight pullover, so it's not always what I'm going to gravitate towards with the 3/4 sleeves. And honestly, I haven't been reaching for 3/4 sleeves nearly as much as I feel like I used to. I've just been in a long sleeve or short sleeve or tank top space and not as much in the in-between space for whatever reason. That being said, I did pick it up a couple of weeks ago to wear, and I was like, this is a really nice sweater. It fits nicely and I should wear this more often. So I'm making an intentional effort to wear this one a little bit more frequently this winter, since this is the time of year that I can wear it. I feel like with the worsted weight yarn, it's a little bit too hot to wear once you get, too far into spring or in early fall even. It's still just too hot to wear. So winter is the time to wear it, and if I need a little bit more warmth, just throw a cardigan over it to, make up for the fact that it does not have full-length sleeves. All right, let's go ahead and get into finished objects. So the last time I recorded, these were a half-finished object, and this is technically 2 finished objects. I'm going to go over them at the same time. I already shared these in my Everything I Knit in 2024 video, and you've at least seen the half-finished object, so I'll just briefly go over these, getting them on here. So these are Rockmill Mitts, and these are a new design of mine that I released in December, kind of as a nice little holiday accessory, though they're also perfect for this time of year. I almost exclusively wear fingerless mitts because most of the time, if I'm going to be going outside, I'm kind of in and out and driving, and I need access to my hands and that sort of thing. It's only when it's really, really cold and I'm going for a walk, for example, or if I'm playing outside in the snow with my daughter, then I'll go for a mitten. But most of the time, fingerless mitts are where it's at for me, so this is the perfect time of year for me to have more fingerless mitts in my wardrobe. So as I said, these are a new design. They just feature a textured pattern. You can see that there are slightly different textures. So the whole premise of this design is the textured pattern. There are 6 options for the textured pattern, and each of these uses a different iteration of the textured pattern just to, provide some versatility in finding stripe sequence that you like to knit. There are 6 options, so you can pick the one that you like best. And also I made a worsted weight version over here and a fingering weight version over here. So the worsted weight version is knit with Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the slate green colorway. And I really liked working with this yarn, and I definitely want to try knitting a sweater out of this yarn. I think it will be a nice and sturdy sweater that will hold up to wear well, just based on the construction, kind of how the yarn feels. It just feels like it will be a sturdy yarn that will hold up over time. So I'm excited to knit a sweater out of this. I have a sweater quantity that I'll probably be casting on soon with, so not not yet, but maybe by next time I'll have something casted on with it. It was a really nice knitting experience, and I think it was lovely to work with. The finished object is soft, but still feels really sturdy, which is super nice. And then for the fingering weight version, this is also Knitting for Olive. This is the Knitting for Olive Merino, and I held it with Untold Pure Silk Mohair. So this is a different brand of mohair that's not Knitting for Olive. I just couldn't find the matching mohair in stock in this color at the place that I was purchasing from at the time. So they had a different brand that had a really similar color in stock. So that is what I purchased. Really lovely experience working with this mohair. It's super soft, and honestly, even though this is so much lighter weight than the worsted weight version, I feel like both are just as warm, and the one with mohair might even be a little bit warmer because you have the mohair fluff kind of like filling in the spaces. So even though it's super light, it's super warm, which is obviously great for wintertime, and definitely something to think about for, you know, you don't necessarily always want a super chunky feeling knit, but you still need that warmth, and mohair definitely helps to provide that extra warmth. Next, I have my first finished object of 2025, and these are some tiny little toddler mittens, which of course look incredibly wonky at this point because they've been worn in the snow and taken to daycare and all of the things. So I knit these because it's cold and my toddler needs mittens, and we only previously had one pair that I had made her, so I knew that I needed to make some more to make sure that, you know, we weren't always hunting for the one pair of mittens that I had made. And also, as it's getting even colder into the wintertime, I wanted something a little bit warmer for her. So for these ones, I used leftover yarns, and you can definitely see the halo in this. So I held fingering weight with mohair. The yarns that I used were Fyberspates Vivacious 4-ply in the maple syrup colorway that I had left over from a tank top that I had knit last summer. And then I held it with Moondrake Co kid mohair that I had from other previous projects that I just had floating around kind of in my leftover bin. So it was a nice little, not quite matching, but very close to matching mohair to go with the merino. And I did the same modification for, I have not even specified what pattern that I'm using here. So the pattern that I'm using is a very heavily modified Quotidian mitts. So this is a fingerless mitt pattern that I released, I guess, in 2023 at this point. So a little over a year ago that I released that pattern, and it has options for fingering, sport, DK, and worsted, and fingerless mitts along with full mittens, and also like a long fold over top. So I use the worsted weight numbers as a base, the smallest size of the worsted weight, and knit it with fingering weight to get a toddler size mitten. So I did the same modification that I did the first time that I knit her some toddler mittens, and this time just knit it with fingering weight and mohair as opposed to just fingering weight. And just by the nature of adding in that additional strand of mohair, the finished size is a little bit bigger. So these will definitely last longer for her as she continues to grow, because that's what children do. They just are constantly growing. So these will last a little bit longer and also are going to be super warm thanks to that mohair in there. We recently had a pretty big snow, and my daughter got to wear these. And I was also wearing a pair of mittens that had mohair in them. And I was really surprised by how well just like a merino plus mohair mitten keeps the snow out and like keeps your hands warm. Of course, you know, if you're going to be out there for a really long time and you let the snow soak in for a really long time, you will get cold, wet hands. But for a little brief outside time, you know, I think we made it maybe 5 or 10 minutes before she requested to go inside. The fingering weight and mohair is just right. I'm sure that as she grows and is ready to spend more time outside, I will need to go the waterproof mitten route, but for now these are definitely a great option. The next finished object that I have is not a knitting finished object, but I thought I would go ahead and share anyway, since it is something that I worked on since the last time that I recorded a podcast, and that is a stocking for my daughter. So has a little bird on it and pears, so this is kind of like a partridge in a pear tree stocking. And I finally made her stocking only 2 years late, but I will say this is definitely the first time that she really understood the concept of Christmas and that sort of thing, and like was able to open a stocking. So I'm very excited that I finally did this. It was, as I said, long overdue, but now it's done and she will have it for all of her future Christmases, which is really, really lovely. For the stocking, I made stockings for myself and my husband back in 2018 for our first Christmas in this house here, and I have my stocking here. So here's mine. So I just drafted the stocking shape and designed / drew out all of the motifs, did a little name embroidery and all of that. So I just did the same thing for my daughter's stocking. I'm just folding up the top of the stocking here to cover her name. I just drew out the concept on a piece of paper. I knew I was gonna go for sort of partridge and a pear tree themed because we have a pear tree in our backyard, so I thought that would be very appropriate. I just drew out the overall design to make sure that I like the feel and flow of everything, then drew out the essentially life-size templates that I would use to cut out the felt, cut out all of the pieces with felt, did just a whip stitch around the edges, and then in a couple of places like here, did embroidery for the stem and the stem of the leaves, and did a little bit of fine gauge embroidery for the bird as well. So this was a really super fun project, and honestly like very, I guess, inspirational to work on, as in like normally I'm just working on knitting projects all the time, and it was fun to do something just very different from what I typically do and really just have fun with something creative and playful. So I definitely want to consider more how I can kind of bring that same energy into my creative life and knitting life and essentially just bring more play into things. Yes, this was a very fun project, long overdue, but so excited that I finally completed this, and now she has a stocking to match the rest of us. So on to works in progress. I feel like all of my works in progress are pretty far along, so I feel like it's not going to be that long until I just suddenly have a million finished objects, which is always kind of fun, but also feels like everything is taking a long time because I have too many works in progress on the needles right now. But let's go ahead and get into it. This is my Rockmill cardigan and it is almost done. So this is a new design. It'll be released sometime this year. I haven't exactly decided when it will be released. I still have to work through the pattern, do a preview knit, all of that sort of thing. So I may end up releasing it like in the fall time just because it is a DK weight cardigan. So giving enough time to actually have preview knitters work through it. I kind of want to knit a second one as well. So anyway, we'll figure out the timeline on that, but all I have left to do on this one is the button band, which is really exciting. So the rest of the cardigan is fully done here, and I'll give a little close-up of the texture, which is so, so lovely. And on the hems here, I did a tubular bind off, same thing at the bottom, and I will say this bottom hem took forever to do for the tubular bind off, but it's so worth it. It looks really lovely. It's nice and stretchy, so I'm glad that I did it. So I guess I can go ahead and throw this on just to show the fit. All right, I zoomed the camera a little bit out here, so hopefully you can kind of see the fit on this. And it's just a nice, easy cardigan, and it's going to have a button band and probably will block out a little bit, and the hem is currently cinching in because it's the ribbing. Once I block it, it'll relax a little bit, but it's just a nice relaxed fit. Not too fitted, not too oversized, a really nice in between. It has a deep V, and yeah, very excited about this one. Let me re-zoom back in for you. All right, I think this framing is approximately where we were previously. So I am knitting this in Rosa Pomar Vovo, held with Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair. The Vovo is the pine colorway and Soft Silk Mohair is slate green. This is a DK weight gauge, so it's 21 stitches per 4 inches in the textured pattern. I guess it's kind of on the looser side of a DK weight gauge, but it is a textured stitch, like knit, purl, but not, it's like a broken rib, knit, purl, and garter. So the widthwise gauge is definitely towards the looser side, but with the mohair, the fabric, you know, fills in really, really nicely. I honestly feel like you probably could also knit this in a light worsted weight, and it would just have a more structured fabric. That being said, so last time, I don't even remember where I was. I think I was working on my second sleeve, or maybe had just finished. I honestly cannot remember where I was last time, but I will tell you about some of the trials and tribulations that I had along the way since the last time that we chatted. So I needed to reknit several large-ish chunks of this. So on the second sleeve, so I don't know if I had started it or not last time, at some point partway down, I realized I had essentially done a lifted increase out of knitting through one strand of the mohair and one strand of the Rosa Pomargo. So I ended up getting 2 stitches out of 1 stitch, and I'm like supposed to of course be decreasing along the sleeve. And I didn't notice this until like several inches later. So yes, it's only 1 stitch, but it was throwing off the stitch pattern and it wasn't the right stitch count, and this is a design sample and I want it to be reflective of the actual pattern. So I ripped back and reknit it and was just very careful from that point forward to not accidentally do a lifted increase with, you know, knitting through 1 strand of each of the yarns that I'm holding together. Then I also ended up needing to reknit a chunk of the body as well. So I know that the last time that I had recorded, I had gotten at least a little bit past the V-neckline shaping, and I just kind of had the body on hold while I knit the sleeves to figure out like where I was doing on yarn usage and all of that. I realized when I had picked the body back up after I put it on pause for a little bit that I had not finished doing all of the shaping at the underarm that the pattern calls for. So I'm not sure if you can really see, but the armhole edge here extends further out than the body. So there's just a little bit of shaping at the underarm here to, you know, provide a really nice wide shoulder at the top of the cardigan, but not as much positive ease, and just kind of like provides just a nicer shape at the underarm area when you have that shaping there. So I had not done 2 sets of decreases that I needed to do for the body. And again, I'm like, this is a design sample. I need to make sure that I'm representing like the garment to what the pattern is telling you to do, making sure that those things match. If I did not have those last 2 decrease rows in there, that's something like 8 stitches, and 8 stitches with a 21 stitch gauge is like, what, like 1 1/3 inches? Something like that. I don't know if that's exactly accurate. Anyway, more than 1 inch of circumference, and yeah, I want to make sure that it's right. I want to make sure that, you know, the instructions work out. So I had to rip back quite a large chunk of the body to get back to the place where I hadn't yet finished my decreases and do 2 more decrease rows, then continue the neck shaping, and then starting to work flat or work even from there for the rest of the body. So I was a little annoyed at myself that I had to redo that, but sometimes you gotta redo things and it's totally worthwhile in the end. So now that all of that is behind me, the cardigan body is done, all I have left to do is the button band. So I need to just sit down and make sure that the calculations that I had done previously still look good based on the length that I knit this to. So I ended up knitting this to a length that kind of made sense with the stripe sequence, and I'm not actually sure if that's like the original length that I fully was like, yes, this is the length that I'm just gonna like put in the spreadsheet here to be what this length is gonna be. I just did it based on what makes sense in the stitch pattern. Yeah, I just need to double check my calculations, adjust things a little bit if I need to, and then also calculate the buttonhole spacing for the cardigan. I am glad that in a previous cardigan pattern that I had done, I made myself a nice little buttonhole worksheet thing where I just have to fill out the worksheet to calculate my buttonhole placement. Excited that I don't have to do a ton of rework there. I can just use my existing worksheet and have it go super quickly, but I just need to take the time and sit down and do that. And I've just been working on a couple of other projects since, so this has been on pause for a little bit. I'd mentioned in some of my previous videos that I was kind of worried about running out of yarn for this design. I think I'm going to be absolutely fine at this stage. I have one full ball of the Vovo left and at least one, if not two, full balls of Mohair left, so I definitely will have enough since I just have the button band left to do. That being said, I absolutely did need to buy the additional yarn that I did, and my initial purchase was not enough. So definitely a good thing that I did do that additional yarn purchase. Still remains to be seen whether I only needed to buy one extra or whether I will need to tap into that second extra as well, but not the worst thing in the world to have, you know, a little bit of extra, and honestly way better than running out of yarn, especially for a design project and getting stuck because you either can't get any more, it's going to take a while to get more, or whatever else there. All right, it is getting quite toasty in this with my worsted weight sweater with my DK gauge with Mohair in it cardigan, so I'm going to take this guy back off and just wear my sweater. My next work in progress is a lovely little kid sweater here. This is the Little Bryce cardigan, and this is the pattern that I designed when I was pregnant with my daughter, and I'm just knitting her a bigger one at this stage. I'm using Knit Picks High Desert Sport in the Forge color. I'm using US 5s for the body, so kind of on the looser side of sport weight gauge. You could potentially use a light DK for this design. I'm working the size 4, intended for a child who is up to 4 years old, but I belatedly realized that I did not do the setup row right after the hem, which adds a little bit of additional stitches to like get enough circumference for this intended circumference. So this is definitely in between a size 2 and a size 4, so I guess it's kind of like a 3, but knit to the length of a 4. I'm definitely pretty much guaranteed a between size, and it's probably not going to fit her all the way up until the time that she's 4, unless this ends up blocking out a lot, which like it could, because cables kind of squish up a little bit. You do have the seed stitch here, which is a somewhat more relaxed widthwise stitch pattern in comparison to stockinette. So I didn't realize this until I was like already at the shoulders on this. Clearly I did not count along the way. I was just like, cool, I have my cable panels, right? And there's seed stitch in the middle, let's go. And I didn't even count when I like divided at the underarm. I was just like, here's the right number of stitches to put the divide point. Okay, I'm gonna work some until I have X many stitches for the other front. And I didn't count the back. The area where there are fewer stitches than there should be is the back of the garment technically, but it does look like a little bit, you know, long and skinny at this point. I don't think that this is really going to be a problem for my child because she is a tall and skinny child. I just think that it may have resulted in a sweater that she will not necessarily get to wear as long as I was initially anticipating, but she'll still get to wear it. So I did try it on her after I realized my mistake. I had kind of gotten started on the sleeve and I'm like, I might as well just like see how this is looking. So fully unblocked, tried it on. It does totally fit. Once I have the button band on there, it should be fine. And it should also increase somewhat in circumference beyond what it currently is in its unblocked state. So we should be at least in a good spot for the remainder of this winter and at least the first portion of next winter. Of course, nothing is ever guaranteed. I don't know how fast this child is going to grow, but she'll at least get somewhere out of it. So I should have counted, you know, I should have actually followed my pattern, but this seems to be a theme with me where I don't always follow my instructions and then I have to either fix it or I decide if it's like not a new design sample that it's okay, everything's gonna be fine and she's still gonna be able to wear it. So I'm just starting to work on the sleeve, and this is of course a super tiny circumference here, so this does go fast, though I again kind of have set this one aside a little bit, so I haven't worked on it a ton recently. I definitely should work on it more and hopefully maybe finish it soon so that I can maximize the amount of time that my daughter does get to wear this. All right, on to some new cast-ons, and I'm going to talk about these two at the same time. So I am making 2 hats, and I'm sure that you're like, these yarns look incredibly familiar, and if you look closely at this one, the stitch pattern looks familiar as well. So I am making Rockmill hat, or 2 Rockmill hats, and this will be a new design coming out probably in February. This features the same stitch pattern options as the mitts, and I'm using the same yarns as the mitts as well. So the worsted weight is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the slate green color, and the fingering weight is Knitting for Olive Merino held with Untold Pure Silk Mohair, and I think both of them are a rust colorway. Same yarns, same stitch patterns, so it's just going to be the matching hat for the mittens, and I'm excited to create that matching accessory. I like to create a lot of matching knits because either do a full matchy-matchy look, or you can knit them in different colors but still have something that goes together. Anyway, I enjoy creating things that match, so that is what I'm doing. I had initially wanted to be able to have this release for a, matching accessory set at the holiday timeline, but that did not happen, and you still absolutely need hats in the middle of winter. So we're working on it now to, as I said, hopefully have for a February release. These are going really quickly, and they're currently the projects that I'm devoting the most time to, so my garments are kind of on hold right now. These are what I'm focusing on, and I should have the pattern ready to go relatively soon, and that should be going into preview knitting. So if you are interested in preview knitting a new design, you can always find the link to my preview knitting list down below in the description, and that will just get you on the list to get an email when I send out the preview knitting call so that you can fill out the application once that's ready. So for the worsted weight version, I am reasonably far along here, and I just kind of need to get far enough until I can start the decreases here. I did a long tail tubular cast on to have a nice finished stretchy edge here, and this one is going nice and quickly, so I'm excited to have a dark green hat in my collection. I don't think that I have anything in like this color, and this is one of my favorite colors to wear, to look at. It's just a very nice color. Then for the fingering weight version, I am knitting this one with a folded brim. So I've basically only knit ribbing here. I think I've done 2 rows of the textured pattern, so this one currently looks very boring, but I'm excited that I'm now in the textured stitch phase, so that should go pretty quickly. Again, it'll just be knitting straight for a while until I reach the decrease section. And yeah, I also did the long tail tubular cast on this one as well to have a nice stretchy edge, which is really great for hats, especially for a 1x1 rib. It is a little bit fiddly to get going and to make sure that like things don't spin out of place as you're doing it, but since you are kind of like working flat at first, it's not too hard to manage. It is a little bit more fiddly on the fingering weight version here because I don't have circulars that are in this size. So the brim is knit on US 1s. The main texture pattern is knit on 1.5. So I do not have circulars in those size. I only have double points. It's a lot easier if you're just casting onto a single circular and you can just like keep everything a little bit more in line that way. But these are both recent cast-ons, cast on within the last like, I don't know, week or so. So very fast projects, and should be wrapped up here pretty quickly too. And yeah, there will be a pattern coming out soon, as I said, hopefully in February. So it's a few days later now. Apparently I had an issue with my last file not recording correctly, so I lost the last bit of the podcast, but I am back wearing the same sweater here for, I guess, visual continuity purposes, but I'm telling you that it is not the same day that I recorded previously. Apologies for my voice. I seem to have gotten the cold that my daughter brought home from daycare last week, but we're here, we're back, and we're talking about my last project here. So this is Quotidian Tea, and I cast this on more than 2 years ago at this point. So I had cast this on either right before or like right after my daughter was born, just to have like an easy stockinette project. I worked on it that winter and then kind of put it away when when it got warmer and stuff. Then I picked it up the following winter, got a lot farther, so I had like maybe made it to here in the first year and then knit all of the upper body in the second year. And I'd gotten partially through the V-neck I-cord trim that I was doing here, and that was when I had last put it away. So I have revived this back onto the needles because I would really, really love to have this in my wardrobe. It is a great basic. It's going to be a long sleeve version of this pattern. So the Quotidian tee pattern comes with like a ton of different options. I'm making a long sleeve one here, and I modified to have slightly taller ribbing at the bottom, an I-cord instead of ribbing at the neckline, and then I'm working the fitted waist and fitted sleeve version. So there are a couple of different body fit options. There are two different sleeve options, one with a more gentle taper and one with a more fitted taper. So I'm doing the fitted taper to kind of work better with the more fitted body that I'm doing here. And as I said, I got this back into the needles. I finished doing the I-cord neck trim, and then I also picked up for the first sleeve, did the sleeve cap, and started working on the underarm here. So I'm a couple decreases in at this point, and I have all of my stitch markers back here for all of my shaping. I know a lot of people do this, clipping a bunch of stitch markers onto your project so you don't have to refer back to the pattern. You can just know that once I run out of stitch markers, I am done with my decreases. But what I've done here is use two different colors of stitch markers. So I have a set of this greenish color, and then I have these orange ones. And that's because my sleeve has two different shaping rates. So I know that once I run out of the green ones, I'm done with my first rate, and then I can just continue going in my second rate. So again, it's just kind of a way for me to be able to work on this pretty mindlessly and not have to keep referring back to the pattern as to how far I've gotten my increases or decreases, and when I need to switch from one rate to the other rate. So that is a fun little add on the using locking stitch markers tip to keep track of how far you are in the shaping. So it did not take me very long to get this far, but I've also now set this aside since I've had a couple of other projects on the needles that have kind of taken a little bit of precedence. Those hat projects are currently my priority, but we're already like essentially in the middle of winter. We're towards the end of January. If I do want to have this done this winter to finally be able to wear it after, you know, casting on several years ago, I do need to bring this back into focus. That being said, if it does end up languishing again and I don't quite get it done and I can't wear it until this next winter, that's not necessarily a bad thing because this is going to be a great basic addition to my wardrobe. I know that I'm going to wear it a ton regardless of when I finish it up. It is like so soft, so lightweight and warm that I would love to be able to wear it sooner rather than later. Once I have those hats off of my needles, I think that this project as well as my daughter's sweater are going to be my primary focus so that I can try to get both projects done in the time that we would actually be wearing them this season. So I'm going to keep my Rockmill cardigan on hold for a little bit longer and wait to do those button band calculations. As I said, I'm not necessarily in a rush to release that design just because by the time I would get done with all of the finishing touches on the pattern, getting it through editing, putting it through a preview knit and all of that, it's probably going to not necessarily be the most seasonally appropriate garment. So I think that's realistically going to be a later in the year release. So that kind of frees me up to focus on this project, my daughter's sweater, and being able to get these knits into our wardrobes. So I don't think I mentioned the yarn that I'm using for this. I am using a yarn from Very, Very Deep Stash, a lace weight merino from a yarn shop that I visited when I lived in Boulder, Colorado for a summer back in 2011. The shop no longer exists. It was their in-house line. And I knew that I was probably not going to knit a sweater out of that lace weight just held alone. So I ended up purchasing a couple of years back some Knit Picks Aloft to hold with it. And it's creating this lovely gray marl. You can see how that looks there. And I love that it's just like a beautiful charcoal marl effect that's very gentle because the mohair kind of helps to blend everything together nicely. So even though it's a pretty high contrast between the light gray and the black, it creates a really lovely fairly uniform effect that just kind of has a little bit of a glow thanks to that gray that's the base. I'm really pleased with how this is turning out, and I kind of want to use the same strategy to help use up other sweater quantities that I have that I'm not necessarily in love with the yarn on its own, and seeing like, could I hold it with another yarn? Could I hold it with mohair, or like another yarn and mohair, to turn it into something that I actually would wear, so I can use what I have in my stash and turn it into something that I would wear and love now. So I'm definitely going to be exploring that this year. That is everything I have to talk about today. Thank you so much for joining me as I chat about all of my projects. I'm definitely excited for the next time I record, since I will probably have a solid number of finished objects, which is definitely very exciting because I feel like a lot of these have been on the needles for kind of a long time, and I'm just working on a lot of things at once, but we should have quite a few finished objects next time. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that fun finished object project video that I'll have coming your way soon. I would love to know, what are you working on right now? What are you excited about working on and wearing this winter? I'm really excited to continue working on all of my sweater projects here, cast on some new sweaters, and really just dive into deep winter cozy knitting. You can always find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Carrie Knits, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.